Hi everyone, it's Stephanie, and you are tuned into the review of Married at First Sight, Season 6, Episode 13, I believe. Okay, so before we get started, I'm just going to let you know that this review is going to be a little bit shorter than my others. I actually had surgery a few days ago, and so I am not feeling my greatest, but I did wait for the pain pills to kick in so that I can record this video. I've been committed to this process. I'm always committed to helping others and have definitely built a rapport with all of you all that I've been talking to for weeks on end about this show and about relationships and giving feedback and advice. So I didn't want to skip this week, but I am going to kind of run through and then give you more moving forward in the next week. So this week we started out with Ryan and Jacqueline. The episode starts with them kind of talking to Dr. Pepper, who comes to visit, about the situation that happened last week on the tales of guys' night and girls' night, and really just the overall lack of communication in their relationship. And because of the lack of communication or twisted communication, they're finding themselves very unsure and not really knowing where they lie. And it's getting to be somewhat adolescent in some ways, like, well, if you feel that you don't want to stay, well, I don't want to stay either. And it's just really a lot of like overarching self-sabotage. So Dr. Pepper talks to them and they have a good rapport with her as well as with each other. So I find that when they kind of calm down and Ryan is willing to see his faults and be a little more accountable, the conversation goes more fluidly. I noticed that in this episode, especially at the beginning, well, really throughout, he was a lot more malleable in kind of wanting to make the right changes, wanting to include her more, wanting to be less isolative and think more of a couple. You know, Dr. Pepper asked them what they would change or what they want to work on not doing moving forward, and Jackie said over analyzing and making things a bigger deal, and Ryan said, you know, not cutting her off in the middle of an argument and listening to her more and making more time for her. So what I'm seeing here is there is growth and he is recognizing things. They're both recognizing things, but you know, as you've seen in the last few episodes, it seemed to be more him struggling to recognize things. So I really like hearing that. But I just am still unsure because we've all known Ryan to say the right things. So as I was watching tonight, I was thinking, okay, this sounds great, but I don't necessarily feel the energetic connection with his words. I just kind of hear the words because throughout the season, he's been really good about talking about the things that he wants to do and talking about what they should do and how they'll overcome it, but his actions are completely different. I mean, wildly oppositional. So throughout this whole thing, you see them get along well, talk about the future, have like a very mature engagement together. This episode, all the couples took a road trip. So we're like a week or two out from decision day. So this was like a time for them to pick a place that they wanted to go, almost have a second honeymoon, spend time together, you know, take away the stress of the day-to-day and kind of the nuances that they've been dealing with. And throughout the episode, you see them have a good time. Jackie and Ryan end up going to New York and they do a horse and buggy ride and everything seems to be going really well. However, I just kind of see what I'm not being shown. So by that I mean, like, okay, I see that things are going well, but there's a bunch of stuff on the other side that may be there and it's just not shown right now based on what I've been seeing. So it was good to see them in a good place. The couples actually got together for a dinner where they just talked about where they were and you know, their relationships in a very open forum, and you see them like very eager to cling on to each other, both the guys and the girls, because you know, besides just going to someone who is married and has marriage advice, these particular group of people also have the advice that most people don't by being in this very particular intense experiment. So you see them excited to spend time together, and coincidentally, Ryan and Jackie were not the focus of this meeting. It ended up being about John and Molly and the continuous frustrations that you see occurring with them. So it was good to just watch Ryan and Jackie kind of float along, especially since the last few episodes it hasn't been that way. I just hope that the actions start matching the words so that there's some longevity there. Otherwise, like I've been saying, you know, it doesn't look good. I want to be more hopeful with them, but it just remains to be seen because, we just can't get wrapped up in this little bit of what we've seen on either side. But it just seems to be more consistent on the end of, certain things really need to be working out for them versus the actions and the words just kind of going along, as we've seen in this episode. So that is Ryan and Jackie. Jeffte and Shawniece, they do a pretty good job. They're pretty even keel throughout this episode, except until the end. They choose to go to, I forgot where they went. I want to say it's like Virginia. They choose to go there, and they have a beautiful cabin type of experience, and Shawniece keeps asking for romance, and Jeffte's, honest about saying, I've never really been romantic. I've never really known how to be romantic. And so he finds their wedding day video and he surprises her with it. Of course, Shawniece cries because she's a crier and she loves the effort. So what I'm liking to see about him is, he was, I don't want to say thrown into this experiment because it was a choice for him. But he went into this experiment and, the first few weeks he was pretty much kicking and screaming each way. And now he's more aware of where he falls short. And the good part about him is that he's happy to make those changes. For him to take the effort to contact the videographer and find that and surprise that, 9 times out of 10, he's never done that before. Not in that particular situation, but just in general, because I doubt that he's had to do that. So he's acknowledging, hey, I'm not really this guy. My wife wants me to be more romantic. Let me take the effort. And that's what it's about. Marriage or long-term relationship is two servants in love. So it's not about you, but it's about learning to serve the other, and not in a docile, less than type of way, but really pouring into the other and making them happy and respecting them and doing those things. So the fact that he said, hey, this is not really me, but I know she'll love it, and she did. When you see your spouse really happy, that makes you happy because, when you pour into somebody else, you get a really good feeling behind that, and it makes you kind of want to do more. And her response made him really happy as well. So it was good to see him kind of grow up in that way, because it's not just that instant, it's really showing and taking accountability for where you fall short and then doing something about it, because people fall short everywhere. So the whole process of marriage or, long-term relationship is that whole growing part of it, and being okay with having areas to grow in and putting in the effort to grow. So that was really good to see. They were pretty even keel. They gave solid advice at the couples dinner. Where they fell short was at the end of the episode. They went on this like little maze. I don't even know what you call it, but they went on this little maze. Really, the point of this exercise was to work together, and that's where you saw them having frustration. So Shawniece gets really upset because Jephte really is very much a go with the flow, even if the flow is not really going anywhere. So you find that he's kind of like going through this maze, and he doesn't really care what comes of it. He's just like, if it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo, he's like, miny, and there's no logic behind it. She is wanting to be led. She's wanting to work together as a team, and she's wanting to feel like she's included instead of kind of just tagging along. She even says, like, I'm following you, right? And he says, yeah. And she just feels kind of like that's not happening, and it takes her back to where she felt like he wanted to be more single. And so they kind of crash and burn at the end, and towards the end you're seeing him say, like, how could this not be fun? Like, how does this go wrong? I understand both sides. He needs to be, if I advise him, I would say he needs to be more aware that it is a team effort. So your lollygagging in your singlehood is not necessarily what you can do in being in a relationship, because you have somebody else here who's wanting to be a part of the team. So, sometimes you may not care about certain things, but your significant other does. So you start to care. Let's come up with a plan. So I would advise him to just be aware of it, even if it doesn't mean much to him. And also be aware that somebody else is looking to follow him. And what we don't want to see is if he gets to a point where he's wanting to lead and she doesn't trust to follow him. That's a completely different issue, and he would be frustrated with that. So it's important that he takes advantage of having someone who wants to work as a team with him. On the flip side for Shawniece, I would kind of tell her to just pull back a little bit. Everything doesn't have to be magnetized. She sees this, and because I think she's been so traumatized at the beginning of this experiment, she goes from 0 to 100. And that's a lot of times what we do. We tend to protect ourselves and don't want to be hurt, so we go, you know, all the way to the left and say, okay, well, this is what it is, so I can protect myself. I now know what it is, and now I can pull myself back. No, he's not acting the best way, but I feel like she's also overreacting. I get it, you want to work as a team, but clearly your spouse is just trying to have a good time. You know, he kind of put in effort in showing you some romance and wanting you to see that he's working on that aspect of you. He's not taking this game seriously, and I think that's where she was frustrated, because this game symbolized so much for her. So I would kind of say, you know, like, take a chill pill. It's really not that deep, and everything isn't that deep. If we had to make a big deal about everything and made an analytical thesis about what everything means, it's exhausting, and it's just unnecessary sometimes. And this is one of those episodes in life, not just in this episode, where you kind of have to choose your battles. You know, does this really matter? Is this really representative of our relationship? If there are things that continue to happen over time, then I would say yes. But they've been in a good space. They've been communicating well. They've been, you know, going through conflict somewhat well. You know, they had that issue with the phone swap, and they kind of got over that in a decent way. So it isn't the biggest deal that we've seen from them too. So that's kind of what I would tell her. Other than that, I think they did pretty well this episode. And I'm looking forward to see them, you know, continue to grow, because I do see growth on both of their ends. Molly and John. So Molly and John, they're continuing on as they have been, which is like really great friends. To me, honestly, there's some sort of disconnect with Molly. I don't know what it is. I've read so many of you guys' theories. Me and my husband talk about it. People think that she's like on the low, dating somebody else, or she's not interested, or there's the theory of he's not working, and that's something that she really wanted. And that actually came up this episode. Or no, that came up on Unfiltered. You know, one of the viewers asked her, is his lack of employment frustrating for her? And she said that at first it was like jarring, because one of the things she wrote down was she wants somebody successful. But when she realized his entire background and his history, she knew that, you know, she had no problem with it. So it really wasn't as big of a deal as I think I have seen people say a lot of that. But we're trying to find out what the disconnect from Molly is. And she hasn't really given us enough information for us to know. So right now, all of us are kind of just saying she's just not attracted to him. I don't know that that's black or white. I don't think the situation is that black or white. There is a disconnect though. It might have to do partly with attraction, but she does think he's attractive. So that's where it's not making sense. I don't necessarily think Molly is presenting herself in 100% like some of the other people are. So it's hard to gauge her. During the dinner, that's kind of the elephant in the room that becomes like everybody kind of points out at the elephant, because John kind of says, you know, he doesn't really want to talk about what's frustrating him, and then he kind of blurts it out and says, you know, this sucks. He kind of is just stuck in it and he has to go through it. And of course she's offended, so she says, well, you're never stuck. But you know, he says that she's very cold, and when the cameras are off, she's even more cold. And that, I felt really bad for him in that moment, because I believe that to be true. She is very reserved. She is very cold. And so I'm sure when the cameras are off, like if you're barely giving anything during, you know, now you don't have to at all. So that's where the frustration is. And I've said this for a while. It isn't necessarily about the sex. It's about the intimacy. So if they were intimate in other ways, you know, holding hands or massages or cuddling or kisses or whatever the case may be, I think he would be okay with that, because I think that even though, yes, you know, physically he wants her, I think that if they were building towards that, he would be okay with that, because he knows, hey, they met 6 weeks ago, and everything doesn't have to have a timeline. But I don't think he's getting any of that. And now he's towards the end, and he's maybe getting a kiss here, a kiss there, and he has taken the pressure off of her, which I believe she has responded to, and she's responding well to. I'm just wanting to see where they go from here. And I'd really love to kind of dig into her background and talk about where this disconnect come from, where, you know, these may have happened in old relationships, the relationship with their fathers. It was actually very great to see them her and John discuss her father this episode. He asked her and she talked about it, and that was such a real moment for me and such a real moment for them because it goes beyond the surface. So it was good to see them be comfortable enough to talk about that, and him comfortable and talk about his parents' history and how that, you know, damaged him, but he kind of turned it around and made it something that was fruitful for his life. So John and Molly remains to be seen. You know, if they end up together, it'll be surprising to me. If they don't end up together, it won't be, but it'll still be something that I don't know if we could really pinpoint, because I don't necessarily know that she is giving her all. I actually don't think she is. So that's kind of where the frustrating thing is for a lot of us and for me. And because I think the way I think and I do what I do, I always am looking for the story behind it. So it's hard for me to just be like yes or no. Like there's usually a reason, especially when we start digging. Like we're made up of layers. And so it's very difficult to just, you know, kind of give somebody their sentence without like knowing why. Because a lot of times if you know why, or if you know some aspect of the story, it's like a light bulb and it makes sense. So that's Molly and John. We'll see how they go. I loved watching overall the couples go on this, you know, second honeymoon. What I think is so great about that is it gives them the time to now engage in a romantic space and a quiet space, just the two of them, engaging in activities and not really dealing with the day-to-day stuff. It's like vacation, you know, you're a different version of yourself on vacation, and it's usually a better version. And they get to know each other at this point, even though it's only been 6 weeks, but it's a 6 jam-packed weeks. So now they're now going with a completely different set of energy, set of emotions, and a set of history. Now we have, you know, memories that we've created together to revert back to each other. We can have a more, you know, fruitful conversation. Where the second honeymoon somewhat are problematic to me, and or any type of trip that you take regarding saving a relationship, is if you have a strong foundation, a trip makes it all the more better. And even if you guys aren't in the best space, or maybe you're just off of a fight or something, it can recalibrate you guys and bring you back to a space where you remember what is so wonderful about each other. But if you do not have a strong foundation, for me, a trip or the second honeymoon, in this case, in these episodes, tend to be somewhat of a distraction. So let's do all these fun activities that kind of take us out of this day-to-day, take us, you know, from trying to dig beyond the surface, and let's just have fun. And that's not the real you. So when I think about Ryan and Jackie, it's like, oh, they're having such a good time in New York, but the last few weeks have been a shit show. Excuse my language. So it's kind of like, is that really them? Is that realistic to kind of go into this decision day? Because are we going to be wrapped up in this feel-good feeling, and it's not really reflective of a strong foundation that we've created? Same thing goes for Molly and John. Not so much Jeffy and Shawniece, because I think they're doing really well now. But if they were not, you know, the second honeymoon, yes, it can make for good times, but it's also kind of like the strong foundation needs to be created before adding that element. Otherwise it's a distraction. It's like, oh God, we don't have to deal with all this other stuff now, let's just have fun. And then what happens next week? So that's my only concern, but it's more good than bad. It's just kind of what I was thinking about as I was watching it. So that is it for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Definitely looking forward to talking with you all as well. As always, click subscribe and comment, and I will talk to you guys soon. Hope everyone has a great week. Bye.